Welcome to Reformers Bookshop's Enjoying Jesus Book Club, where we consider chapters from Enjoying Jesus by Tim Chester. G'day, Tom here from Reformers Bookshop, and welcome to another episode of our Reformers Book Club, looking at Enjoying Jesus by Tim Chester. And we're up to chapter 4, Enjoying the Touch of Jesus. This is a remarkable truth about the work that Jesus has done, that Jesus comes close to sinners and touches them and allows them to touch him. And the reason that this is such a remarkable thing is because of the context that we're given in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament era, the Israelites had cleanness and uncleanness. They understood, God made it very graphically clear, that sin made them dirty and untouchable. They couldn't enter the presence of God if they had encountered uncleanness, and uncleanness was related to sin. And yet when Jesus comes to earth, Tim Chester picks up on some stories from the Gospel of Luke that illustrate this. But when Jesus comes to earth, sinners, unclean people, come and touch him. People who are unclean because, like the woman who has issue of blood, she's unclean, and yet she comes and touches Jesus, and Jesus doesn't tell her off. Jesus, in fact, commends her, and she becomes clean, because she touches Jesus. And there's others who are unclean because of their sin. The prostitute, for instance, who comes while Jesus is dining at the Pharisee's house and washes Jesus' feet. And the Pharisees say, how can he let her touch him? But Jesus does. And he commends her for reaching out and touching him as well. It is so incredible that a holy God, a God who says in Psalm 5, for instance, you are not a God who delights in wickedness. Evil may not dwell with you. The boastful shall not stand before your eyes. You hate all evildoers. That's the holiness of God. Sinful people like me, sinful people like you, get pushed out of his presence, dispelled, driven away like Adam and Eve were from the garden. And yet in Jesus Christ, the Father, the Holy Spirit, God, the triune God, comes down near to sinners and allows them to touch him, to live with him. He bridges that gap, and he does it not by ignoring uncleanness, not by ignoring sin, but by making people clean, by the power of his holiness. It's incredible. It really is. And the other aspect of this that Tim Chester points out is that we see God's desire for us to understand this truth and to experience it in our life through the sacraments. There's certainly baptism, which he doesn't talk about much in this chapter, although Tim's actually written another book called Truth We Can Touch, which engages with baptism in that way. But in this chapter, he picks up the theme of the Lord's Supper. And it really struck me as I read Tim's explanation of the Lord's Supper in chapter 4 of Enjoying Jesus, that in essence what the Lord's Supper is Jesus saying to us what he said to Thomas when Thomas was doubting, and Jesus appeared to Thomas and the other disciples in a room, and he says to Thomas, here, reach out your hand and touch me. And that's, you could use your spirit-filled imagination that might help you in your devotional life to imagine that happening as you take the Lord's Supper the next time you celebrate that sacrament with your church. Jesus is saying in the Lord's Supper, here is my body, reach out and touch me. Here is my blood, reach out and touch me. And he, in fact, through the elders in your church, hosts the supper And not only says, hey, look, here's a table that you can come to if you want. He says, let me serve you. Let me come down and offer myself for you to touch, for you to taste, for you to feel, for you to be close to. How much closer can you be to a person than to share a meal with them? And that is, humanly speaking, outside of marriage, that's the closest experience we have with other people. It's inviting them into our house, inviting them to dine with us, and that's what Jesus does every time we celebrate the Lord's Supper. That's a really tangible way that we can see and experience and enjoy the fact that a holy God has come down near to sinners who are unclean like me and you, and has invited us to touch him. No, he has reached out and touched us, enjoying the touch of Jesus. That's chapter 4 of Enjoying Jesus.